There was nothing else at all in the whole world but football.
Hey guys, how you doing? It's Simon here from the Triple F. Hope you're all well. This is the Triple F show, and this is a chat that I had with Mike a couple of weeks back. At the time, he was quite indifferent about how St. Pauli were getting on, as they'd just come off the back of a loss to Hannover. But seeing as they just won this weekend away to Karlsruher by 3-1, I'm sure his mood would have been a hell of a lot higher than it was when I recorded the conversation. So, yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to release the Triple F show conversation that I had with Mike earlier. But, yeah, it's just the way it is. Unfortunately, life got in the way and I've had to wait a bit longer. But it's too good of a conversation that we both had to not release it. So I had to release it, and I hope you guys all enjoy it. We had the customary St. Pauli chat, and it was really good to see how they were getting on at the time. And yeah, it was a nice chat that we had about St. Pauli. And considering I'm a British man that moved abroad, we also had a really interesting conversation that I've wanted to have for a real long time about British players abroad. We talk about the players that are currently plying their trade overseas, and we also cover the greats of British football that had done so back in the day. Anyway, it was a really good and interesting discussion that Mike and I both had, and I really hope all of you guys enjoy. Thanks again for listening to the Triple F, and take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so no better place to start with you than St. Pauli, mate. How's things as a St. Pauli fan at the moment?
Was good, could be better. Unfortunately, we had a bit of a frustrating result at the weekend. Losing 1-0 to Hannover was a bit painful, to be honest with you. I blame the international break. I hate the fact that they put an international break like 3 or 4 games into the season. I always find that really disrupts everything. But, you know, fair play to Hannover. They've done some good work right at the end of the transfer window to try and turn their early poor start around. And yeah, we just weren't in the running for it, which is a real shame because we've had a really good start to the season, a lot better than I probably would have expected. And to see where we're sat at the moment is still quite nice. But, you know, it could be better if we hadn't have lost at the weekend. But other than that, yeah, I'm still a happy boy with how things are going at the moment.
That's cool, man. Was it a home loss to Hannover?
No, it was away. So, you know, you kind of... The way I always look at a good season, or a reasonably good season as well, is that if you can win all your home games and draw all your away ones, then, you know, it ends up with a fair, decent amount of points. But there's always going to be a slip-up against some teams and some away wins and some home losses. But, yeah, it's still a bit of a shame. I'd like to have taken a point at the weekend, but yeah, it's what it is. I'm still smiling, mate, and that's what matters.
That's cool, man. It might be a bit early to say, but who would you kind of guess as the big dogs of the Zweite Bundesliga? Who do you think are going to be the ones that are going to push for promotion the most?
Well, I think if you'd have asked me like a week or two ago, if you'd have asked me at the start of the season and then asked me again like a couple of weeks ago, I would have given you different answers. With the way that the pace has been set by some of the guys that are currently at the top of the league, it was quite surprising. But I still think come the end of the season, you're going to end up with the real big dogs at the top. You're going to end up with your Schalkes, your Werders. They're going to be up there and thereabouts. You know, considering Regensburg had such a bad season last season, to now be currently sat top, 4 wins out of 6, you know, it just shows how good the quality of football is in the league, and a few changes. And yeah, they've gone from scrapping around the relegation zone to, after 6 games, sitting at the top of the table. So I think it's going to be one of those seasons where anything can really happen. I know obviously we talked a few pods ago about, you know, will St. Pauli be up there? And and pushing for a place. And I said, no, I'd be happy with mid-table. You know, three wins and a draw out of 6 already. It's not unlikely. So I think, yeah, we'll be up there as well with the other big dogs. Werder has started to find their footings after a bit of a rockier start, but you know, they've now picked up 3 wins and 2 draws out of 6. So yeah, I think they're going to be real title contenders this time, and I think HSV are in for another bad season.
They're the Spurs of the Zweite Bundesliga, as you like to put it.
Yeah.
Schalke, what's your thoughts on Schalke? Do you think they will sort of get themselves out of the rot that they were in the Bundesliga, and they'll sort of transform that that kind of, you know, what we consider Schalke to be a great sort of big team? Do you think they'll be able to sort of turn that around and get themselves back to where they see themselves?
Yeah, I think they're going to bounce back. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I think they're going to spend a little time, sort of, not necessarily a little time adjusting, because they're not doing that badly, and the league is quite tight at the moment. But yeah, I can see them. I can see Werder Bremen walk in the league, and I can see Schalke going up in promotion as well. I genuinely can. I think it's nice to see Regensburg and Paderborn and teams like that are sitting near the top at the moment. But yeah, and St. Pauli as well. But I don't think it'll maintain. I can see us finishing sort of, you know, 5th, 6th now. My optimism is slightly more renewed than it was before the start of the season. But I think, yeah, they're going to be the two that will come Christmas. I think they're going to be up there and really pushing for that automatic promotion spots.
I suppose he's a bit of a sort of unsung hero when it comes to the Triple F, because we mentioned him quite a few times, but Eric Smith being missing for your last game, you think that had a bit of an impact and perhaps a reason why you lost that match?
It could have been a factor, knocking a bit of sort of rhythm out of the team. But at the end of the day, you know, that before the previous game, he was actually injured in the warm-up, and Aramu came in, and we still won that game. And I think, you know, he will be a miss for us, but I think we've got a solid second in that position, who's someone who's come on leaps and bounds across the last 12 months. So I don't think he'll be as missed as what we probably would think, but he is still a great player. You take any great player out of the team, they're going to be missed, and he is, by all intents and purposes, a great player.
Yeah, he's somebody that, you know, like I said, we've talked about him quite a few times before, and in my opinion, he's somebody that, you know, as soon as he was sort of brought into the team, he's sort of, you know, he's given St. Pauli a different dimension. He gives them a bit more of a professional kind of feel about the team. And I think, you know, he's somebody that I can see for, you know, the sort of rest of the season, Timo Schultz looking at Eric Smith as somebody that he's going to rely on quite heavily, but you know, we'll see. But yeah, like you say, you've got the likes of Aramu and Benatelli that can kind of fill that role quite well. So the squad depth is good at St. Pauli, so it's always good to see.
Yeah, something that we haven't really sort of thought about in the prior to last season with the squad depth and stuff. It looked quite small, but when you're looking at that kind of linchpin midfielder, we've now got 3 players who are good, great, and awesome. You know, in that kind of respect, with Smith he'd be the number 1 choice in that position as part of the regular spine. But Aramu can come in, and Benatelli as well can really shake things up. Slightly different player. He's more of a deep lying playmaker kind of thing. But he's still a great player to put in there as well. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the core, that centre of St. Pauli, along with the new goalkeeper, who, you know, he's been a good signing, and you've got Zierus as your centre back, Smith in the midfield, and then Bergstaller and Kjaer at top. They kind of, you look at the team sheet and it's like, yeah, their inclusion is almost a guarantee if they're fitting well. And the other new central defender, whose name I've now forgotten as well, he's come in and formed a fantastic partnership with Zierus. I know he's now injured, but they managed to keep Lawrence out of the team, and someone who I rate really highly as well. So, we've got a good solid centre there, and bar an injury crisis, I think we'll be all right.
I mean, sort of speaking of signings as well, perhaps a player that's almost like a new signing, but isn't really a new signing. And we've talked about him before as well, but Simon Mcenock, it seems as if Timo Schultz is kind of resting his hat a lot on Mcenock and that Bergstaller sort of front partnership now, which is nice to see, because I think last year it was more of a front three that he sort of favoured, wasn't it, with sort of Zalazar, Marmoush and Bergstaller, but he seems to really be relying heavily on the front two with Bergstaller and Mcenock. How do you think that's going at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a tough one, really, but I think Mcenock is a good holding player to support Bergstaller. I mean, if you look at Bergstaller as a general rule, and obviously, his age and stuff, you kind of don't expect him to be as fit, and he's quite a pacey guy for such a big lad. He's quite happy to run out to the wings and stuff as well, leaving Mcenock to just play through the centre, or if they decide to play it long, he's a great player for Bergstaller to feed up, and obviously Kjaer as well, who's they've kind of got the two up front, and then they've got Kjaer just playing this almost free role across the back. He seems to pop up everywhere. And I think that kind of really helps, giving him that freedom. I mean, he was a fantastic player and was heavily tipped to sort of leave St. Pauli. And in this summer, I think Mainz were interested in Kjaer at one point to take him to the Bundesliga. But, he stayed. He wanted to stay as well, which is always nice to know. But, giving him that extra freedom has really given him a new lease of life. I think he was slightly overshadowed by Marmoush last season, but his stats are absolutely incredible and really surprising. I think I looked on Transfer Market, the website, and looking at his stats for the goals and assists, I think he was involved in about 60% of St. Pauli's goals in total, with assists and scoring, since he joined at the start of last season. So giving him that extra freedom with those two, I'll say big lads up top, yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. It's a really dangerous front three, and Mcenock is kind of slotting in nicely, in my opinion.
Nice. Yeah, it's always good to see that sort of traditional big man, small man partnership, sort of throwback to the days of sort of Michael Owen and Emil Heskey. So it's always nice to see that, especially because you don't see it as much as you used to these days. So. Yeah,
totally agree. It's definitely a nostalgia thing from the old, early 2000s and 90s back. It's nice to see that kind of traditional thing that you probably see more in the English leagues 1 and 2, as opposed to Championship and Premiership, where the traditional number 9 is no more. So yeah, it's nice to watch it, almost for a little bit of nostalgia. And fair play to the guy; he's playing well.
Check out Under the Floodlights, where guests come on to talk about their favourite players or managers. We have episodes looking back in history and shows also focusing on those playing the game right now. It could be your choice of player that goes under the floodlights.
Keeping in theme of St. Pauli, kind of lead things on to our next subject, and it's talking about British players abroad. And I think, as we're talking about St. Pauli, we might as well start with James Lawrence, and, being a Welshman that's playing over in Germany in the Zweite Bundesliga. And then we can sort of talk about James Lawrence, and then we can sort of lead into other players as well. But I mean, how would you assess James Lawrence's time as a St. Pauli defender?
Good. He's one of my favourite players, and I don't know if it's because he's Welsh. I'm not Welsh, it's not like a nationalist thing, that kind of a pride thing or anything like that. But I love watching him play. I think he's got the skills that are really suited to playing in the St. Pauli team. Some players, they go, well, not even necessarily abroad, they'll go to other teams and it doesn't fit, but he just seems to seamlessly fit in there. And he's also very strongly embodied the mentality of the club. And that's something that really hits home with us, that, it's like, anti-fascist, anti-discrimination, what's not to love about the club? And that was pretty much the first thing he said before he walked through the doors. And it was just like, you've just enamored yourself to all the fans and stuff. And he is quite well liked as a St. Pauli player. So it does go to show that while they're not always a success, British players can play abroad regardless of the league.
It's good to see that. It's quite an interesting one to talk about because it's a weird one with British players abroad because it's not there's not major sort of sample sizes to pick from. There isn't a lot of it happening nowadays. It's happening a bit more. I think the 90s was the sort of purple patch of when it happened quite a lot because it sort of reminds me of the days of Paul Gascoigne, sort of Paul Ince and David Platt, them going off to Italy. And I even remember Kevin Keegan back in the day. Well, I say remember, I wasn't even born at that point, but I've known of Kevin Keegan. I think he was perhaps one of the first ones sort of going over to Hamburg and having a real good success of when that happened. So it's weird how sort of after the 90s it just sort of, you didn't see it so much, or not so many prominent English or British footballers were sort of trying to go abroad and make a name of themselves. But it's perhaps after the Jaden Sancho, I think he's had such a great success of it at Dortmund. I think after him, now we're starting to see the likes of Tomori from Chelsea. He's now gone to AC Milan. Reece Nelson, Kieran Trippier. Jude Bellingham obviously went over to Dortmund as well. There's a lot of names now, a lot of people that are sort of following Sancho's footsteps, if you will, just seeing that was a great example that you can do it abroad, that British players can do it abroad. And it's good to see that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's one thing that I thought of. I mean, as you say, the 2000s was really a dry patch for good players going abroad. I mean, you have got the examples like Michael Owen and McManaman and Jonathan Woodgate as well, all going and playing for Real Madrid. But there wasn't many names from the sort of 2000s period that I can think of that went and played abroad, unless it was to, at that time, retirement leagues, places like the States and China and Japan. That was the other big one, I think, as well. And Australia, they were always considered, the final payoff before their end of their careers. Whereas nowadays, obviously, the players are going abroad in their prime, and not necessarily even in their prime, but in their potential years. Your Jaden Sancho's is a prime example. Jude Bellingham obviously went, I think he was 17. And there's a couple of other players as well. Reece Oxford, who's still playing in the Bundesliga. They're players who are up and coming players and are willing to actually try their luck at these. I think the most closely linked styles of football are Germany and the Premier League. I think they're very, very similar. So a lot of the players are kind of making that transition. They've seen the success of Jaden Sancho in the Bundesliga, and it's probably opened their eyes more to this whole world of football that we've got. The Premier League is one of, if not the strongest leagues in the world, don't get me wrong, and they all want to be playing here. But if they've got the potential to go to your Dortmunds or your other big clubs like that, and potentially play European football without having to try and work their way through your Man Cities, who just buy the best players rather than rearing them, Phil Foden aside. I think it kind of has, and as you said, Tomori as well at AC Milan.
Yeah.
it's another player who's realising his potential and going abroad. And there was obviously interest in, is it Hudson-Odoi from Chelsea, and Tammy Abraham is now signed for Roma and stuff. Mourinho, I think, manages Roma now, doesn't he? He's got enjoyed.
Got Chris Smalling there as well, obviously.
Yeah. I wouldn't say he's reaching his potential now, but he's on the latter part of his career. But Italy is a lot more slower and composed game, so probably suits someone like him. He's a good footballer, don't get me wrong, good with his feet and stuff. But, those players, the younger generations are going abroad and trying their hand. And it is kind of that throwback to the 90s with your Paul Inces and Gaza and players like that, when they all made the transition to, at the time, the best league in the world in Italy. So, yeah, it's good to see. And it's good to see, mentioned as well, Kieran Trippier, trying his hand at a club that isn't Barcelona or Real Madrid over in Spain. It's nice to see him going and join Simeone and actually, from what I know, playing all right over there. So
for Trippier, it was a jump that kind of paid off because he's obviously won the La Liga last season, and I think he always sort of mentioned that playing with Simeone was something that attracted him a lot because there's no better manager to learn from, especially the defensive side of the game, than Simeone. So. And perhaps for England's benefit as well, because I think perhaps not the sort of key right back that England have at the moment, because we've got about 4 or 5 to pick from. So he's going to be difficult sort of cementing his name as that one regular starter for England in that right back position. But I think we've definitely benefited from the fact that he's learn a different side of football under the likes of Simeone at a different country. So I think, I think that's good.
Yeah, I agree. And I do, touching on the whole England point there as well, I feel it's something that's always kind of held back the England team. People always complain about, never win a major tournament and stuff like that. But when you look at the major teams, I'll just start with the Euros. When you're looking at your teams like Germany and Italy and Spain, they've got players that are playing all over Europe. And you look at the wider world and you look at your Brazils and Argentinas, and so many of those players are actually playing football elsewhere, whether it be in Northern America or whether it be in Europe. And obviously now the China market and stuff, which isn't as hot as it was before, but they're taking in so much culture and different styles and really opening their eyes to so much more. Whereas we always seem to have seen that the best of the British players always stay within the Premier League. Is that because they deem it the best league in the world, or is it just a real lack of success from previous ones that make them scared of actually going out and sampling stuff? As you said, Jaden Sancho, going abroad and being a real success in another one of the best leagues in the world. It's kind of given those younger players that real, well, if he can do it, why can't we? And it's great to see. It is really, really great to see. And as you say, with Trippier, and I know he's playing for Man United now, but Sancho, when he was playing for Dortmund and stuff, it really benefits the England team as a whole. And I think it does show. I think it would be good to see more of the best of the England team going out there. And I feel sorry for the smaller nations of Britain, things like your Wales and stuff. They don't necessarily have the best players. Obviously, you always get that exception. So you've obviously got Gareth Bale, who was, I don't actually know what's happened to him, was obviously at Real Madrid, which hasn't been the best spell for him. But, he's the anomaly in their standard of players. And with the best will in the world to them, they don't have those standout, fantastic players. the best Irish players or Northern Irish players and Scottish players are playing in the upper leagues in England, in the Premier League and the Championship. I don't know, maybe if they actually sampled some of the lower teams, like Reece Oxford playing for Augsburg. He's not going to be playing Champions League football at Augsburg. But maybe that would help some of the Welsh national team, James Lawrence playing for Wales. Hopefully that experience that he's taken from my Bundesliga to the national team is really sort of helping them as well. So it's a very odd one, and one I've always thought was rather strange. But hopefully, we'll continue to see more British footballers now making that transition into the top leagues across Europe.
Yeah, no, it's a good point that you make about, like the likes of Reece Oxford and James Lawrence, these sort of players that, like you say, if they perhaps wanted to, they could sort of get their agents to really fire for a club of the likes of sort of Dortmund, where they would more or less sit on the bench, but they could be that opportunity for them to try a sort of a more popular name abroad for them to go for. But like you say, it seems like they've taken more of a sort of realistic approach to things and thought, look, this is the club that's going to be better for me. And it's more or less a club that's almost on the same level of where they came from with the likes of sort of West Ham. They're I would say a bit higher than sort of Augsburg, but when Reece Oxford, he went to Mönchengladbach, I'd say those sort of clubs were on the same sort of par. I'm not too sure, which club did James Lawrence come from?
Oh, now you're asking. Why do I have a feeling it was a Championship club? No, it wasn't actually. I've just remembered it was Anderlecht.
Oh, right. Okay. So he's actually had a taste of being over at a different country as well.
Yeah, he's been around a bit. So, I mean, looking at where he started his youth years, he was originally at Arsenal till 2003, and then from 2005 to 2006, he was picked up by QPR. And after that, it kind of all went a little bit, well, no, actually, HFC Haarlem.
Dutch. Yeah, it's a Dutch club, yeah.
And then he continued his youth. He spent a lot of time travelling around in his youth. He was then at Ajax, Sparta Rotterdam, and RKC. I'm going to pronounce this wrong. It's Barvik. And then he signed a contract at AS Trenchen before moving on to Anderlecht. So, he's got the pedigree there as well, playing for Anderlecht in Belgium. So, yeah, he kind of been, I wouldn't say a nomad because he's not played for that many clubs abroad, but, he's got that experience of actually playing out there. Oh, and that's another player as well that I've just remembered, also playing for Anderlecht, obviously, when I think it's Vincent Kompany who managed them now. West Ham player who never really got a chance in the first team, Josh Cullen. I think he was 24 and still going out on loan every season and never really getting a chance at West Ham. He signed for Anderlecht, and they're now saying, it's some of the best money they've ever spent. It was like £500,000. He's been absolutely fantastic for him. And it really appears to be benefiting the Irish national team as well, having a player that's out there playing international football, playing abroad, and now going back and playing the international football. So, yeah, there's a few out there. You've just got to kind of scratch the surface past the big name clubs, and you'll find these real gems that are playing abroad. It surprised me when I did a bit of research on this, how many players are British nationals that are actually playing abroad that you just never hear of. So, yeah, it's nice to see.
It was a good sort of thing you brought up, how the likes of sort of Reece Oxford and that guy you mentioned there, Cullen, where they, it's not sort of picking that sort of big household name, that they're sort of, trying to make their name at a smaller club and perhaps use that as a bit of a stepping stone to sort of further their career. But it's also good to hear about Lawrence and to discover that together. We both sort of realised that together, and we noticed that, he's got a kind of made a name of himself across quite a few different European clubs. And perhaps, FC St. Pauli saw that and saw that, we're not going to be taking a gamble on a young British guy or a British guy that hasn't really sort of stepped out of his comfort zone. We're taking a gamble. We're not even taking a gamble. We're taking somebody that's comfortable, playing within different European settings. So that, that sort of puts these players in good steads as well, which is good to see.
Yeah, I think, looking at Lawrence's sort of youth career as well, and looking at he did bounce around a bit in his younger years from what I can see, but, it's actually nice to see these young players. For whatever reason, he didn't obviously make the grade at Arsenal or at QPR as well. So, he's gone abroad and he's managed to pick up. He spent 2 years in the Ajax academy by the looks of it, which goes to show that the fact that he's a good player. Ajax have got such a good youth system. It's how they maintain their club, I think. But there was obviously the potential for a good player there, but he's gone out and he's sampled, Dutch football. He's gone out and he's sampled Belgium, and now he's in Germany. And it's good to see that he's not like Sancho. He came over to Dortmund, made a real success for it, and he's gone back to the Premier League. And that's the thing. It's nice to see these other players that are British, and they're not just going, oh, we could go back and sign for a championship club. They're still, out there living that European dream, as it were.
No, definitely, because it'll be interesting to see what Jude Bellingham does after this. I'm with you. I hope, and I don't think it's. Well, I really hope that it's not going to be a disappointment where Jude Bellingham then decides to come back to the Premier League. He could, sort of make a real sort of big name of himself at Dortmund, or perhaps even think, I could go to Spain, or I could go to Italy, or I could go to another European powerhouse and really sort of stake his claim. And I really hope he doesn't just go back to the Premier League and, that'll be the end of his adventure. I really, will be good to see if players like Bellingham then use the sort of opportunity of playing out in Europe to, really sort of further his career. Yeah,
I agree. I think it would be really disappointing to almost pick up his education in Germany, and Abraham to continue his education in Italy, and Tomori in Italy. And then, the money of the Premier League kind of talks to him. It would be nice to then kind of go, no, do you know what? I've done Italy now. So let's go to Spain. Let's go to Germany. And continue that European tour. And, hopefully, with those kind of players, really sort of bring it back to the England national team and, give the England fans something that they've been craving for a while, and that's more success because they're bringing more variety. And I don't necessarily want to use the term culture, but like the footballing culture of other countries, and bring it into the national team that's been stuck for so long in the Premier League. So yeah, it'd be nice to see those players continue. I can see, Abraham will get the shining lights of the Premier. It'll go be a success in Italy. And all of a sudden, you'll have, I think Chelsea have probably got a buyback, I think. But, if not, then your Man Cities and all that sort of stuff, the other top Premier League clubs start sniffing around him and he comes trudging back. It'd be a real shame. I'd love to see him just carry on out there. I really, really would. So fingers crossed, same with Jude Bellingham as well. No disrespect to Dortmund, but we all know that Bayern, with their pulling power and their, I don't know, they always seem to manage to pick off Dortmund's best players, with Lewandowski's and players like that. They seem to be able, Max Hummel, players like that seem to make that transition from Dortmund, which seems to be the second biggest club in the Bundesliga, to Bayern. And there's the opportunity for Bellingham, I think, with his quality, and he is a quality player, for him to also make that cross-club switch, shall we say. So, yeah, fingers crossed they continue this journey out there.
Speaking of the England team, I think there's a player that benefited. It might have just been a sort of brief season-long loan, but Mason Mount, he actually spent a year at Vitesse Arnhem, just for a year. And, I think that really helped him to sort of become the player that he is now. And I think, he had that time at Derby, obviously under Frank as well. And that really helped him make his name at Chelsea. But, I do think mentally, whereas, players like Mason Mount, they don't really need to worry too much about the talent side of things because they're always going to have that incredible talent. But when it comes to the sort of discipline and it comes to learning new cultures, like you mentioned before, and just sort of picking up these things that are more to do with the head side of the game, that's where I think, experience like that are just absolutely vital. And I sincerely believe that, someone like Mason Mount learned a hell of a lot being at Vitesse Arnhem, just as much as he probably did at being at Chelsea and Derby County.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I don't know, maybe cast your mind back. We obviously touched on the fact that a lot of sort of the 2000s period wasn't necessarily big for British players playing abroad. But one thing I do remember, it's a long while ago, so I don't know if I'm remembering right, but there used to be a lot of sort of links between lower Dutch league teams and Premier League teams, and they quite often players would go over to these teams. I think Belgium had some as well. There was links with some of the clubs in Belgium, and the big clubs like Man United would almost not. It's not a feeder club, but they'd have that agreement where they'd send their best players out on loan to these. You don't see that anymore. You don't necessarily hear about it, sorry. And, it's something that could really benefit, especially players as big as Mason Mount, who's now been an absolute fantastic success at both Chelsea and international level for the England team. Maybe it's something that clubs should actually realise, that a season, 2 seasons abroad with their, I'll use the term feeder club, it's not, but, with the club that they've got links with abroad. I do genuinely believe, not just from a footballing perspective, but from a people's perspective, that experiencing other cultures is something that can really enrich a person's personality and life. So it can only do good for the footballer with that similar sort of thing, both the standard culture and the footballing culture coming together. So yeah, I think it's something that can really benefit everyone. But yeah, it's something that you don't tend to hear of anymore. It's maybe something clubs should look at bringing back potentially.
Let's just hope that Brexit isn't going to have, sorry to bring up the B word, because I'm sure it's a thorn in your side, but yes, I think, I am worried that Brexit is going to have a sort of effect on this side of things, where it's going to be more difficult. There's probably going to be more red tape where these, players want to go out and play in Europe. And I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping it's not going to be that difficult for them. But then again, as I'm saying that, I have just realised, and we have talked about a lot of players that have, managed to go out during this season. I think Tomori made his, loan move from AC to Milan permanent during a time of Brexit being rife. So, it does happen and it can happen. So maybe it's more of a fear-mongering thing that we seem to see going around a lot these days. So yeah, perhaps it's just more of that.
Yeah, possibly. I think the difference is with a lot of clubs and the sort of level of players that they'll be looking at. I think it might be more difficult for, say, championships level players going out and playing in like Spy Bundesliga and stuff. Obviously, Lawrence was already abroad before it all happened. And, for the smaller clubs who don't have the money, whereas there's probably these large, your Juventuses, your Real Madrids, your Bayerns, they've probably got people who'll just deal with all the red tape stuff. And, they'll just sort all that out. And, obviously Roma, Tammy Abraham went over there. So it's definitely possible, but it might sort of hinder. Maybe the youth players possibly won't be able to go out so much. The lower level players maybe won't be able to go out so much. The people from the Republic of Ireland have obviously they're probably sat there laughing because, you know, the Irish players can still go all out there. That's not a problem. Yeah, touch wood, it doesn't kind of come a cropper for a lot of these players because it's something, as I say, it's something that enriches all of us. So I'd like to see it continue now that it's actually started to happen.
Yeah, definitely. Most successful British player abroad, is there sort of a name that sort of springs to mind?
I mean, there's been some big names go out. Obviously, as I say, in recent times with Gareth Bale, and you go back a little bit with McManaman and Owen, and I don't necessarily think any of those had real success. I think you would probably have to go back even further, and players like Gaza and probably Platt, to be honest with you. You know, we've never really had a massive success. Actually, no. Do you know what? Probably Jaden Sancho, which is quite bad because I'm looking at someone who's literally played there till the start of this season. So, you know, he was fantastic. Well, you've had Lineker at Barcelona and Grampus, you know, and yeah, I'm struggling to really think of any British players who've been a massive success abroad.
I sort of compiled a list, and there was a few names that sort of sprung to mind. It's not really a debate per se, because there is one player that undoubtedly is the most successful, and you have to go back really far. I think it was even the 60s. John Charles, who played for Juventus, he won 3 Serie A titles and 2 domestic cups, and he was a really interesting player because he was almost like Dion Dublin in the sense where he was a really good centre back and a fantastic centre forward. And he scored a shit ton of goals for Juventus. But he's a player that I was talking with a friend not that long ago. He was on for an Under the Floodlight special, and we were talking about Jimmy Greaves. And Jimmy Greaves actually tried to play for AC Milan. He signed for AC Milan. He was there for about 6 months. But because Jimmy Greaves liked a cigarette and a pint, it didn't get on too well. So he wasn't sort of adored by the AC Milan fans that much, and it wasn't much of a success. But with John Charles, I think sort of Jimmy Greaves saw the success that John Charles had at Juventus and thought, you know, if this, you know, quiet lad from Wales went there and did the great things that he did, then, you know, why can't I do it? But unfortunately, it wasn't the case. Like I said, I think the fags and the booze were just obviously not such a great idea.
Yeah, and that was the thing. One player I think we've failed to mention actually in relatively recent times, who seems to have been successful wherever he's played, is David Beckham. Actually, he's one player that I've got a list here as well of it's actually a quiz, and yeah, he's the top most known player, but obviously he played for Real Madrid, AC Milan, PSG, before going over to America and stuff and living the high life out there. But he was probably, he was probably the most successful player of recent times, definitely. But I mean, looking through this list that I've got here, you know, there's a lot of them who only ever played for one club abroad. There's a few exceptions, like surprisingly Joe Cole, but that was a couple of loan moves. And Gaza played for 2. Even the big players, as you say, like Kevin Keegan, who had a real success at Hamburg. But you know, David Platt played for Bari, Juventus, and Sampdoria, so he obviously did something right. You know, and yeah, there's a lot of one club wonders. But yeah, it is difficult to think of who's been the most successful. I'd probably have to say, looking at this very short list I've got, it would probably be for me, David Beckham, actually.
Yeah, it was funny because when I wrote my list, I just sort of did it off the top of my head, and I only put LA Galaxy, AC Milan, and PSG. I completely forgot, obviously, Real Madrid, perhaps being his most successful stint abroad. So yeah, it was weird. I don't know why I completely forgot about that one, but I did. But you definitely have to put him up there for being very successful. It's interesting as well, his time at PSG. You could perhaps make an argument for that being the sort of catalyst and the spark for PSG's kind of foray into stardom, if you will, because I think it was perhaps a little bit before the oil money came in, shall we say, but the sort of...
I think that was on that kind of turning point. You're right. I think it was when the money had started to come in, but before they'd really kind of bought the success, because he only actually went out there for 6 months. And do you know what? Obviously, his wage packet was insane, absolutely insane. I think, if I remember rightly, wasn't it about $500,000 a week he was earning at Galaxy? And it was just after he finished at LA Galaxy, and he went and played, what was it, the final 6 months, I think, of the season at PSG. But one thing I will say to him, hats off, that if I remember rightly, every penny that he earned whilst playing for PSG for those 6 months was actually donated to charity. So, you know what, I mean, he didn't need to make any more money. You know, the guy's minted, and fair play to him. Fantastic footballer, and he really made the most of it with his trips to Real Madrid and obviously his paydays in Galaxy. So, yeah, fair play to him. But I think he was kind of, I think you're right in saying, not necessarily the catalyst, but he was the real sort of start of the money, like Robinho was when Man City was taken over. He was that kind of star player that I wouldn't exactly say he really took off in City colours, but, you know, he was the first big money signing. And I think Beckham was definitely there or thereabouts for PSG.
Yeah, perhaps not a catalyst, like I said, but more of a glimpse of what was to come.
Like finding out as much as you can about clubs you've heard of and those you haven't? Then come check out The Magic Of, where we delve as deep as possible into the rich history of weird and wacky clubs all over the world.
Sorry to go a bit off topic, but you know, it's almost funny to see the likes of Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe. Almost, I think it racked up, I think all of their sort of transfer fees, almost half a billion or something ridiculous like that. And they only ended up mustering a 1-1 draw against Bruges yesterday. So it goes to show all the money in the world doesn't buy success. So it's interesting to see. But then again, we've got a long way to go until the end of the Champions League or Liga. And so, yeah.
The other thing I've always said is football's a team sport. At the end of the day, you can have all the best players in the world, but if they don't play well together, then it's not necessarily the best thing. But I mean, just transfer fees alone, Neymar was 200 million, and Mbappe was like 130 million. That's before signing on fees and agent fees, and obviously Messi, while a free transfer, isn't a free transfer. There'll be so much money that they've spent out on him. But you know, for me, that was definitely a marketing kind of a marketing signing. Don't get me wrong, world-class player, one of the best in the world ever. So he's still got the talent and the skills to play at the highest level. So, but it was definitely a marquee signing, shall we say?
So going back to Galacticos, or sort of keeping on that sort of high profile kind of player, and we sort of mentioned him before with Gareth Bale. I mean, it's not just sort of pick at your words, but it's almost sort of pick at the sort of sense of how Gareth Bale's career at Real Madrid has gone, because a lot of people and a lot in the media would suggest that Gareth Bale's time has kind of been a failure. But if you look at it, I mean, he's helped to win, and he was a big part of one of their Champions League success. But I think he's got about 3 Champions League medals to his name. I'm just going to look up now how many honours he actually picked up at Real Madrid. But it's weird to say and weird to see, that how his career at Real Madrid is considered to be a bit of a failure, a bit of a flop. But in all fairness, he's the amount of things that he's won for Real Madrid haven't been that bad. So he's won 2 La Ligas, 3 Champions League medals, the Copa del Rey, another Spanish domestic cup, UEFA Super Cup, and the FIFA Club World Cup. That doesn't really count so much. He's won that 3 times, if it does count for people out there. But those Champions League wins and the La Liga wins are absolutely massive, and it's odd to see. And it seems to be such a sort of common debate how people say that Gareth Bale And you'd probably hear a lot of Real Madrid fans say they never really liked Gareth Bale and they don't think his career was that great. But I mean, the proof's in the pudding. It's a pretty decent haul of trophies, if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, as you said, he had a real big part in one of their Champions League wins. Didn't he come on as a substitute? And like, weren't they losing like 2-1 or 1-0?
I think that was against Liverpool, wasn't it?
Can't remember. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. His career has been absolutely astronomical. I mean, the scary thing is, I mean, if you look at a lot of his time with Real Madrid, he was brought on a lot from the bench and stuff as well, and probably never made as many appearances. And then he obviously had that weird stint at Tottenham. Mind you, in saying that, looking at so according to Wikipedia, his time at Tottenham, he scored 11 goals in 20 games. So the guy's got talent. I don't remember him scoring that many, to be fair. And it is Wikipedia. So, but yeah, I mean, if you look at some of his, I'm literally looking at his stats now. So he joined obviously in the 2013-2014 season, scored just in La Liga 15 goals in 27 games. You know, you can't really knock his success. The following season, 13 in 31, 19 in 23, 7 in 19. So you wouldn't exactly call that a flop, not with those statistics. I think part of the problem is that I think they were expecting the next Ronaldo, you know, or someone as good as Ronaldo when he signed for him and stuff. Because wasn't he the most expensive player in the world at one point?
Yeah, yeah, he was.
And I think that kind of is probably what built such an expectation that his time is considered a flop. But yeah, I wouldn't exactly call his statistics. The problem as well is he's quite injury prone. And I think that's why a lot of people don't necessarily deem his time a success. I mean, looking back at the 2016-2017 season, scored 7 goals, but he only made 19 appearances in La Liga. So there was obviously an injury or something there. 26, 23. The appearances aren't that massive. So when he plays, he scores. You know, it's what, average of better than 1 in 2 most seasons. Yeah. So, you know, you can't deny that. And I think most clubs would kill for a striker who will score 1 in 2 games.
Mm.
And he's not even an out-and-out striker. That's the other side of it as well. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't profess to follow in the league so closely that, you know, I'll monitor his performances and stuff like that. He could look really bone over on the pitch, but yeah, knows where the back of the net is. He might not be the best team player, but, you know, when you look at it statistically, and maybe people will in the future kind of look back at his career and go, do you know what, actually, wasn't that bad. We don't know. But yeah, I'd be hastened to agree. And with that roll of honours, you know, people can mock him all he likes, and he's just like, well, look, my trophy cabinet, where's yours? That's, I think, a very key thing there, and I think something that a lot of people gloss over.
Yeah, because I think the trophy cabinet, like you say, it can't be argued with, and I think perhaps it's more of a PR kind of side of things that didn't work for him, and I think the fact that, you know, although there are sort of rumours and there are stories and there's probably a lot of proof that his Spanish is really good, but, you know, the fact that he didn't come out and do a lot of sort of press conferences or interviews in Spanish, I think, you know, that didn't really sort of endear him towards the Real Madrid fans and so on. And I think not that it should necessarily, because not a lot of players do that even over in the Premier League. Not every sort of player does. And you know, I think Aguero didn't really learn that much English whilst he was over here at Man City. But, you know, you sort of add that onto the fact with his sort of golfing escapades and, you know, that sort of incident that happened with Wales with that sort of, what was it, Wales first, golf first, Wales second, and then Real Madrid third or something like that. It was a weird sort of flag that he had, and I think the Real Madrid fans went nuts for it. So it's I think perhaps that's probably what caused him to be seen in a different sort of light, and I think that's why he's not considered a sort of Real Madrid legend like the likes of Zidane and players like that. And I think, it's a shame. It is a shame that, that it's gone down that way, considering what he's achieved for Real Madrid, and, what he's done as a servant of Real Madrid is absolutely fantastic. And in my opinion, he should go down as a legend. But perhaps just that sort of public relations side of things that's just caused it to be a bit more sour than it needs to be.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. He's probably not helped himself. And, that they pay all this money, and as I said before, he's got quite a few injuries. And so, he obviously hasn't enabled himself. And I think when you talk about legends when it comes to Real Madrid, I think they've had so many legendary players. Where do you rank him with your Zidane's, Figo's, your Ronaldo's, Raul, Moriente? The list goes on of these, Roberto Carlos, the fantastic players that just roll off the tongue. They're household names. As I say, I'm not a massive La Liga fan. I don't follow it so closely, yet they're just players that have literally just come to my head. Michel Salgado, I can just go on and on. Iker Casillas,
Beckham.
David Beckham. And that's the thing. So when you're looking at the legendary status of some of the names that have played for Real Madrid, Luka Modric, you can just go on and on and on. And I think that's the hardest bit. He's been a fantastic servant for Real Madrid, and he's done the job. Has he justified the giant transfer fee? Has he justified his wages? Do you know what? As I say, people will make that judgment call in 10, 20 years when they look back on what a fantastic player he was. And I think that's the thing. At the moment, while he's still playing, he probably will have people will have a different perspective of him now to what they'll probably have in 10 years' time when he's not playing. And I think that's where we should be watching.
Yeah. No, definitely. But it was really good to sort of go through British players abroad and just find out and sort of explore perhaps why, it's taken a while to happen, but, it's good to see that it is happening now. And it's, it's really interesting. It's nice, like you say, you think of these names that you haven't really necessarily thought of before. And I found it really interesting. I really enjoyed doing this, mate.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's an eye opener, I think. And when you actually do look at the list of players, as I say, this quiz, it just goes to show the time periods where there was obviously a real purple patch, as you said, with, Gaza, David Platt and Pauli all going abroad and playing in Italy at this time. Then this real random dry spell in the middle, and now the more modern footballers going over and playing abroad. It's really interesting, and it's a good read. It's definitely worth people sort of looking into more who have a real passion for football. It's definitely something that would be a real eye opener. And I think it's also quite interesting just to look beyond the top leagues. And there's some really, really interesting players playing in some really interesting leagues. Places like Hong Kong, there's England players out in Hong Kong, and where was it? Jermaine Pennant played as well. Wasn't that like Vietnam or I've got it here, Pune City, wherever.
It's India.
Is it Singapore?
No, it's India, Pune.
That's what I thought, but it's a real eye opener to sort of see these players that are playing in some really, really far stretched leagues and stuff. It's really good, and a real eye opener for everyone. So people need to look into it and check it out.
Definitely, mate, definitely. And I'm hoping that, like we sort of mentioned and like you mentioned before, that this is going to sort of open the door for a lot more British players to do that and to go abroad and to not just feel inclined that they have to do it, within their own shores. And hopefully, take that step and make that adventure happen for themselves.
Yeah. Everyone needs to expand their horizons, and it's the same for footballers. You know, soak in the culture that people enjoy, and footballing culture is a fantastic thing. It really, really is, and they need to go out and experience it. And you know, more people need to go out and watch it as well. They need to expand their minds and realise that there's more football than just outside the Premier League. There's more football outside than just the Premier League.
Yeah, no, definitely. As an Englishman myself, living over in the Netherlands, it's something that, I definitely recommend footballers. If any footballers are listening to this, I'm not sure they are, but you know, if they do, then I would suggest making that step and trying it, because you know you don't just learn about football, you learn about so much more, and it's really worth it. Yeah, I agree. You know what? As much as I hate to say it, quick touch on point, West Ham would just beat Dynamo Zagreb 2-0 in their first foray back into European football. And the guy who I was just going to mention, Declan Rice, also scored as well. But you know what? I would love to see someone like Declan Rice go over to play for Bayern. I think, or even in Italy as well, he could be a real success at somewhere like Juventus as well. I mean, the guy's a phenomenal player. I think, you know, if he went and played out in Italy for a while for one of the big clubs, your Juves, your Inters and stuff, you know, you could see him being ranked on all this sort of. I genuinely will stand by this comment in years to come, but he could be like the next Pirlo, you know, just sit at the back. People say he always passes sideways and back, but those people have never watched him play, pinging balls left, right, centre to either wing. He could do that, and I think in a country like Italy or Germany, he'd be a real success. So I'd love to see Declan Rice go abroad. Yeah, let's hope that happens. I totally agree with you. I think, you know, if he was to go to Chelsea, because I think Chelsea is the club that he's sort of linked to the most, and it's unfortunately that seems to be the move that would perhaps happen or perhaps be the most likely. But you know, like you say, I'd love to see him go to, you know, Spain or Italy or somewhere like that, because you know he's worth it as well. He's definitely warranted a massive club like that.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine how much that would benefit the England team? Again, we're going back to this sort of circle of benefiting the England team, but Rice playing in Italy, how much would that benefit him? The England team with that style of football, just adapting and evolving on the style that he already plays, that would be absolutely fantastic and a real huge benefit to England.
No, definitely, mate, definitely. But just before we go, I do want to mention that, you know, I play for my sort of local club over here in Nieuwolde in Holland, and I scored on my debut. So perhaps I should have added myself to the list on here.
Well, it's true, mate. It's about what level of football you're playing. You're an Englishman playing football.
Sorry to make a sort of shameful, big-headed plug there, but I couldn't help myself.
No, top draw, mate. Well done.
Yeah, it'll probably be the only goal I've scored, to be honest. It was a bit of a fluke, but you know, I'm claiming it.
Any goal's a goal, mate. At the end of the day, you know, however we score, as long as it's back of the net, that's all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Wicked. Thanks again for coming on, Mike. Appreciate it, mate.
No worries, mate. Anytime. You take it easy.
You too, man. Thank you so much for listening to the Triple F. If you could please drop a like on our Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow us on Twitter, that would be massively appreciated. Hope you're all keeping safe, and thanks again for listening to the Triple F.